Welcome to Kong Summit. My session is about Kubernetes and how organizations can leverage Kubernetes as a universal computing standard. So I feel this is timely to be talking about such a topic because these days, all organizations are going through Agile Transformation. Literally, it is a matter of survival for many businesses. And what does Agile Transformation mean? Agile Transformation typically involves organizations modernizing their applications, developing some new applications, and deploy them and operate them in a way that they can run reliably and securely. And I mean, these days, unfortunately, developing and deploying applications have been quite challenging. You know, certainly the type of technologies that Kong develops, like an API gateway or similar technologies, certainly greatly simplifies how organizations can take various components, various services, and put together applications. But there are still challenges that even an API gateway does not quite solve. Think about it today. Organizations no longer standardize on development framework. So you might say, that's fine. That's what, that's what the standard API gateway is for. Whatever framework, whatever language, whatever tools you use, right? You just kind of code it up and it speaks to a certain API. But unfortunately, on the flip side, these days, the platform, the runtime platform you deploy these applications onto are becoming quite a bit more sophisticated. Gone on the days that in order to deploy an app, you go buy some servers and you go rent some space in the data center and you deploy your app. Today, when the deployment time comes, the IT person, a lot of times, but sometimes even the developer, really have to worry about whether they're deploying the application in a cloud, like on Amazon, or they're deploying it in their own data center, or increasingly out on the edge. The edge could be a small data center, a branch office, or a car. And most developers, when you're out there writing a piece of code, ideally you don't really want to worry about that. But today you kind of have to. An IT administrator, how is she going to keep track of which application is deployed on which infrastructure platform, and how to properly package them, how to properly upgrade them, how to keep track which DevOps team has access to which runtime environment? Because all these infrastructure platforms are actually kind of incompatible. They all implement some kind of a Intel or ARM-based on top of these CPUs, but when it comes to image formats or APIs, they're not really the same. So in addition to everything else that IT and DevOps organizations have to worry about, in addition to what a API gateway platform, integration platform like Kong can provide, they still have to worry about this. And that's where I think Kubernetes comes in. It really has a critical role to play here. So the nice thing about Kubernetes is it's pretty much for the first time in our industry, there is a community agreed, generally speaking, consensus-driven platform that pretty much all infrastructure providers are able to support. And then Kubernetes, coupled with the Docker container format, is actually able to package whatever application you develop in a portable, as a portable application. And then that could be deployed through Kubernetes as a unified, portable, consistent computing platform. Now, conceptually, IT admins only need to be interacting with Kubernetes, and developers, when they write their apps, They only have to worry about how it's going to be deployed onto Kubernetes. So, so I hope that's a lot of this is not news to you. If you're hearing about Kubernetes for the first time, please do go out. It is the hottest technology out there in the compute infrastructure ecosystem today, and go out to kubernetes.io, and there's all kinds of ways to get started. And as you know, Kubernetes is the most popular amongst the fastest growing technology today. And like I was trying to say, it enables a common compute platform across any infrastructure. And these days, you know, you don't just talk about infrastructure in data center and cloud. Even a developer laptop is becoming a very important piece of infrastructure. Majority of the data developers in the world don't really enjoy working in a tethered development environment. I mean, everyone much prefer a local, isolated, portable development environment. So you don't have to SSH onto a hosted machine instance, right, to be able to deploy your apps. And Kubernetes let you do that, because Kubernetes can essentially port your exact same runtime environment that you have on vSphere or on Amazon to your laptop. Likewise, Kubernetes can replicate that environment into your branch offices or out there onto the edge computing platform. And if you kind of peel the onion back, look deeper into it, what really makes it possible is a set of services, infrastructure capabilities that Kubernetes provides. So Kubernetes is not a simple abstraction layer. It's not something that just does the translation. It doesn't just blindly translate whatever you want to do to what Amazon or vSphere or a bare metal server has to do. It actually implements a very rich set of services that are then exposed through a common API. And for many of you coming from again the API gateway world, this should be pretty obvious. In fact, you might even be able to see there's a great deal of overlap between some of the services now Kubernetes offer than even in traditional ways, say a gateway would be able to offer, right? And that's actually kind of a good thing, because ultimately these capabilities are getting more and more widely accepted, and generally there are multiple ways to achieve the same goal. And organizations, by deploying Kubernetes everywhere, they get much higher levels of reliability, because they don't have to worry about issues like managing a cluster, like doing failover, doing redundant, reliable DNS resolution. All these things are kind of taken over for you. And DevOps becomes efficient, because we now finally have a standardized automation framework that's based on Kubernetes. And last, but probably the most important, is it reduces the one-off configurations and homebrew one-off infrastructure configurations that lead to a lot of security holes, because there's so many pairs of eyes that have been looked through Kubernetes code base, and there's so many good practices and security certifications this platform's already received. So if you use that, you'd be able to have a extremely secure application and infrastructure platform. But it has its challenges too, because as it turned out, once you have Kubernetes everywhere, you're not talking about one cluster. You're talking about multiple clusters. A lot of folks didn't quite realize that in the beginning, because as many of you know, Kubernetes came out of a project called Borg from Google. And it's based on the same technology that Google developed in-house to manage their vast infrastructure. And containers in-house for the last 15 years, probably 10, 15 years. And that's why Kubernetes is so good. But there's actually one critical difference between Kubernetes and Borg. In Borg setting, Google really developed one Borg. The idea of Borg came out of the idea that you assimilate all the resources they had over the world, right? So Google has logically one Borg for all of their infrastructure. It is literally one global cluster. And they obviously only use, nobody's running Borg on the laptop or running them on the edge devices. Essentially, Borg is the way that Google used to tie all their data center and cloud resources together, turn it into a global resource pool. But Kubernetes, I was explaining to you, was actually quite different. First of all, it's gone much further than Borg was originally even designed to do. It's running on laptops. It's running in ATM machines. It's just going all over the place. It's going everywhere that a Linux server can go. But also that means there are multiple clusters. I was just talking to a CDN vendor the other day. As you know, CDNs are created using many points of presence deployed in many data centers. So in that world, what they figured out is, every data center, they have anywhere from 1 server to 10 servers, and they're used to offload that network traffic. And each one of them would actually be an independent cluster. So some of the smallest clusters would really only have 1 node, and bigger clusters would have 10, maybe 20 nodes. And overall, they have thousands of clusters, and you have to manage. So Kubernetes itself doesn't quite solve that problem out of the box. And that's why in order to actually manage that distributed Kubernetes clusters, not one cluster, but many clusters distributed all across the world, we need a Kubernetes management platform. And I came from a company called Rancher. We're a open source software company. Rancher is indeed one of such Kubernetes management platform. This is not a talk to sell Rancher, but still I put up the internal architecture of Rancher here just to give you an idea the sort of stuff that Rancher does, or what people are able to do when it comes to manage Kubernetes. And actually there's a place for an API gateway to fit in as well. So I kind of put it, if you notice, under platform services, if you can recognize the logo there. So the important thing to look at this slide is you kind of start from the bottom left side of the bottom. A Kubernetes management platform starts with Kubernetes. So these days, I was saying Kubernetes is everywhere. It is the common compute infrastructure. It is a unified compute platform on heterogeneous infrastructure. So you have data center, you have cloud, you have developer desktop, you have branch office, you have these edge computing devices. They all run Kubernetes. Now they run different kind of Kubernetes. They run different Kubernetes distros. Actually, Rancher as a company, we've built 2 distros. Both are very popular. One is called Rancher Kubernetes Engine, RKE, on the left. And then we have this distro called K3S. It's perhaps the most exciting project going on in Kubernetes ecosystem today. It actually brought the proven Kubernetes technology from data center and cloud out to like Raspberry Pis and surveillance cameras. So edge computing and branch offices. But you can see Kubernetes distro is, there are many of them to choose from. Generally, if you go out to a cloud platform, you probably most people don't really want to do their own distro, because if you do your own distro, you have to run it yourself. And these days, cloud providers offer you a Kubernetes service. They run it for you. The best part, it's like in the cloud, you probably shouldn't be running your own MySQL, right? You'd use RDS. But Kubernetes distros services on the cloud are even better than RDS. RDS actually costs money to run. It costs more money than than buying, the instance yourself. And if you run your own MySQL nodes. But Kubernetes services, generally speaking, are free. So there's really no reason not to use these Kubernetes services like EKS, AKS, and GKE in the cloud. So, and that's why today RKE is primarily used for folks to create, on-premise Kubernetes clusters, either on bare metal servers or on vSphere clusters. But RKE isn't even the only option people have. VMware, I think they've announced it. I think they're shipping it now. Hopefully it's out of the box. It should be becoming easier and easier, for people to just get into vSphere console and then create a Kubernetes cluster that will directly be supported by VMware. But hopefully the vision I'm painting here is in the future, all of the infrastructure will be Kubernetes and they'll be consistent. And that's truly remarkable because once you have something that's consistent, management becomes possible. So that's actually where a lot of the technologies we develop, multi-cluster control plane and cluster operations, platform services. I mean, we integrate projects like Helm, which is a standard packaging format on Kubernetes, service mesh, many of you are quite familiar with, very closely aligned with API gateway and container registries like Harbor. And then one level above, these days, developers, a lot of the developers don't even interact with Kubernetes directly. They go through a platform as a service layer or a CI/CD service or a GitOps service to actually interact with Kubernetes. Rancher does all of these. And on the right side, while we do all of that, we have to stay secure. So Rancher has a set of very, very important security services that ensure that you don't, you don't violate the configuration requirements and security certifications as you deploy applications into these type of different infrastructure. And our customers have been quite successful. Rancher is the most widely used Kubernetes platform in the world. It's more than 300,000 organizations use Rancher. And one of them is one of the major banks in South Africa. I just use them as an example, Absa Bank. They actually moved to Rancher from one. Rancher is also obviously not the only Kubernetes management platform. This Absa in particular actually moved us from one of the competitors because Rancher is open source and it's just our cost model is significantly cheaper. But more importantly, just the capability we built to truly leverage the consistency of Kubernetes across different kind of infrastructure, enable them to significantly reduce their management overhead. And with that, we also made, because Kubernetes is consistent, we made redundancy, geo-redundancy and DR almost work out of the box. So those are the specific benefits that this customer Absa's mentioned to us. As I was saying earlier, Kubernetes doesn't just work in data center; it actually works on the edge. And I always use Chick-fil-A as an example. This is actually an article that was published more than 2 years ago. But back then, a few engineers at Chick-fil-A were experimenting with running a small cluster in like these 3 little nodes, Nook nodes in their each one of their stores, and then start to, and I think back then the primary attraction was Kubernetes enabled them to deploy and upgrade applications fairly easily. So that's kind of where the whole thing got started. Started with our journey in edge computing. Then I think maybe a year later, we were working with a company called Goldwing, the second largest wind turbine manufacturer in the world. And I put them up just to kind of give you an idea why Kubernetes even runs on the edge, because they have these wind turbines that together form a power generation plant, and then these things are deployed obviously in fairly remote areas. But the thing is these power generation, these wind turbines collect a huge amount of data. I mean, you see just, this is their software stack. So they have their proprietary, you know, AI and analytics software stack at the top, but just look at their middleware. They have things like MongoDB, Hadoop, you know, Kafka, just tremendously sophisticated software, right? That's actually running on the edge. And that's why they want, you know, you can't, it doesn't even make sense for them to statically link everything together, or it doesn't even make sense. So that's where Kubernetes comes in, all these exposed microservices, and they all can be upgraded and managed. So you can kind of see why Kubernetes is starting to take off. And we seized upon that and built actually a fairly unique solution. This is probably the biggest, you know, marketing slide I'm going to show in this talk before I wrap up. If you want to take a look at this, Rancher would be a great place to start, because we're 100% open source. We sell an enterprise subscription plan for people who want commercial support, but otherwise everything is open source. People love it, and when you change from open source to support, you don't need to reinstall your software. It's the same software. And we're also the company that truly wholeheartedly embrace Kubernetes as a computing standard, meaning we really don't care what Kubernetes distro you use. You can use our competitors' distro. Certainly, you should use cloud Kubernetes distro. You know, these days we tend to innovate on the distro side more on the edge, you know, edge computing, because K3s is just fairly unique technology. But even K3s, we donated to CNCF, so it's actually becoming a community technology now. In our world, Kubernetes everywhere is the future, and that's what's going to create a lot of opportunity for all of us. And with Kubernetes everywhere, we've been focused on innovation, multi-cluster management. Just to kind of give you an idea, and I was saying earlier, like the Borg approach was like single cluster manage everything. So Rancher pretty much started this multi-cluster practice, and these days it's the standard, it's table stakes now. Every vendor has to support it, but we're pushing it the direction that I didn't even imagine. The upcoming release that's going to ship in a few days, we're actually certifying Rancher to testing Rancher to manage over 1 million clusters, which is incredible, because again, it's driven with multiple clusters in edge computing, right? And finally, one of the big reasons Rancher is being so popular is I think we have very much of the same philosophy as Kong, you know, itself. It's just, we make it very easy to use. A lot of our development start with UI, UX, and you don't really need to read our docs or you know, talk to our consultants just to implement and use the software. And again, this is, like I said, this is a very quick overview of the industry and our solution. If you want to learn more, please go to our website. There's tons of white paper you can download, and there's a lot of material, a lot of case studies you can read. And also you can join forum and start following us on Slack or on GitHub. So that's it. That's what I wanted to cover as part of this talk. And I'd be happy to take some questions.